the night with eyes of red. Vampires in the alleys where good men dread. Wolfmen howling beneath the pale moon. But justice is coming and coming soon. From saloons to graveyards where evil sleeps, they walk among us, secrets they keep, nightmare hunters with souls ablaze, cleaning up this town through the dark haze. Cryptids themselves, yet they stand tall against the darkness, answering the call for every lost soul, every whispered prayer. They fight for the light in the midnight air. Dark haze. The night is young, the hunt begins. For against the darkness where hope never ends.
Good evening, folks. Sorry, I was having a little technical difficulties right as I started the show. I unplugged my mouse with my foot. So, kind of a screw up there, but we're going to get right back to it. Folks, thank you guys for joining us on the Nightmare Hunters tonight. We have got a very special show for you tonight. Robert Jed Raines and Carrie Pocket Doc Davis are in the house tonight, and I'm wearing my Kolchak hat tonight for a distinct reason. I normally wear my cowboy hat on these shows, but tonight we're going deep. We're going into something that we've been looking into and discussing for, about 3 years now, Robbie?
Yeah, thereabouts.
We were the first ones to notice that in the valley that has become known as the Roosevelt Valley, near the confluence of the Wisdom and the Salmon Rivers, there was an area that, for no particular reason that we could find, was labeled on government maps as Zone Echo. That was odd enough. Couldn't really figure out why, couldn't find any frame of reference. So we started digging. And the more we dug, the deeper down the rabbit hole this went. Before we jump in, I want to say a big congratulations to Doc. Doc's new book is #1 in Western horror, so if you guys haven't checked it out, please check it out. It is awesome. You guys are going to love it. But let's get into the show, because we have got a lot of material to cover tonight. The Zone Theory, Triangles, Hotspots, and the Missing 411 Map. This is a national investigation into America's wilderness anomalies. Out there, past the trailheads and the campgrounds, past the places where the maps still bother to draw lines, the wilderness changes. It gets quiet, it gets older, and it's far more aware. People vanish without tracks. Creatures appear where no creature should stand. Voices call from the tree line where no one's there. And the land itself seems to watch. We give these places names to make them feel smaller. The Alaskan Triangle, the Ozarks Triangle, the Smokies, the Bitterroots, land between the lakes. But those names are just the surface. Because when you stack the maps, the triangles, the hotspots, and the disappearance clusters, and the government closures, something else starts to appear. A pattern. A system. A map the wilderness has been drawing for over a century. And tonight, we're going to follow that map. Before we begin, we want to make something absolutely clear for those of you who are listening at home. Absolutely clear. We're all in good health, we're all accounted for, and we're all safe. and none of us have any plans to disappear anytime soon. So let's give the big reminder, this show is for entertainment purposes only. We explore patterns, stories, and documented cases. We're not claiming any supernatural certainty, and we're not encouraging anyone to go looking for trouble. But the patterns are real, folks. The clusters are real. The zones are real. And once you see the map the way we see it, you won't forget it. If you enjoy tonight's deep dive into zones, the triangles, and the hidden patterns of the American wilderness, do us a favor. Like the show, share it with someone who loves the strange, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And welcome to the Nightmare Hunters. Doc, how about you lead us into segment one? I think it's a great way to explain how this theory kind of took form.
Okay, so we're going to start this out with our opening thesis for the show. This is patterns in the wilderness. Across the United States, there are places where the wilderness behaves differently. Places where people vanish without tracks, where creatures are seen that shouldn't exist, where the land itself feels older, heavier, and more aware than it should. These places have names: the Alaskan Triangle, the Bennington Triangle, the Ozarks Triangle, the Bridgewater Triangle, land between the lakes, the Bitterroot Mountains. Different regions, different legends, but in the same patterns. So, why does this episode exist? Well, for decades, researchers have been treating each hotspot as isolated. Bigfoot researchers study Bigfoot regions. Dogman researchers study Dogman regions. Missing 411 researchers study these disappearance clusters. Folklorists study triangles. Historians study ancient habitation sites. But nobody has ever put them all on the same map. And so tonight, we're not just telling encounter stories, we're connecting the map.
What we're actually looking at is we're looking at number one, the triangles. Regions with high strangeness densities, named by the public, often dismissed as folklore, but geographically consistent. Also, hotspots, areas with repeated cryptid sightings, Bigfoot, Dogman, Ozarks howlers, shadow creatures, multi-decade consistency, often overlapping with cave systems, something else we were one of the first ones to start talking about. And then we start bringing in the missing 411 clusters, sudden vanishings, no tracks, no scent trails, no remains, no logical explanation, often in the same regions as those triangles and hotspots. These three patterns, triangles, hotspots, and missing 411 clusters, they're not separate mysteries. They're three layers on the same map.
So we've talked about this before, but the zone system, they're not public. They're not acknowledged by anybody other than shows like us, but they're detectable through behavior. Trail reroutings, we've talked about that, how maps will mysteriously cut one trail off that was there before, and all of a sudden it's not there anymore. Drone bans, we've talked about that, having those geo fences over certain locations where you can't fly your drones, redacted SAR reports, mapping restrictions, federal presence in remote areas. We've all seen that before. When you overlay all these four layers, triangles, hotspots, missing 411 clusters, and the federal behavior, something emerges. It's a pattern, a structure, and a classification system. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight.
Doc, you want to jump in there?
Yeah. So the zone theory, the core idea of it is that the government doesn't use the word triangle. They don't use Bigfoot region. They don't use missing 411 cluster. They use zones. And what zones classify are the things that it classifies as behavior, risk level, species overlaps, disappearance patterns, environmental anomalies, interference patterns, and historical continuity. And so tonight we're going to walk through every major triangle, every major hotspot, every major disappearance area, and see how they fit into the zone system.
So hopefully tonight what you guys will learn as we're talking, by the end of this episode, you guys should understand why the Alaskan Triangle is labeled a lethal zone, why the Ozarks Triangle is considered a multi-species zone, why the Bennington Triangle is the archetype of disappearances, and why LBL is a standalone aggression zone. The Bitterroot Mountains are the only truly confirmed zone as Zone Echo. But why do the government quietly restrict these certain areas, and why the cave systems matter? Why ancient habitation sites overlap with modern hotspots, and why the zone theory explains everything the others can't. These are natural, unscripted lines. Sorry. So what you're saying is these places aren't random, right?
I don't think they're random at all. I mean, like you said, if you start matching these things up on maps and looking at it, like Doc said earlier, instead of looking at this for this and this for this and this for this, you start stacking them up and looking at the overlay, that throws random out the window.
Yeah. Well, also we've kind of over the last few years been treating each of these hotspots like it was its own separate mystery, but in reality, it's really not.
Yeah, and just like Robbie was saying, the whole thing, each spot, when you start adding the layers, all the layers are right on top of each other. They're all in the same area.
Yeah, it's not just folklore anymore. It kind of becomes geography. And
the government layer, that's the part that nobody talks about. No other channel is talking about that as far as we can tell. Yep. So if you guys are listening at home, picture a map of the United States in your mind. Think about all the places you've heard stories from. Now imagine drawing a circle around each one. By the end of tonight, those circles will form a pattern.
And those patterns for the public are triangles. That's what we, the public, view them as. Missing 411 is the disappearance pattern. Hotspots are the cryptid pattern. And zones, zones are the government pattern. So let's start with the deadliest triangle in North America, DA.
Sounds good to me. The Alaskan Triangle is known as Zone Juliet. And I'm going to bring an image up real quick to kind of give you guys a quick and dirty idea. Zone Echo, red. Zone Golf, orange. Zone Juliet, dark red. Zone Charlie, it's a misprint, is blue. You see all of these, and you can see the areas that they're anchoring. Salmon Ridge, Mark Twain National Forest, Chugach Range, Bridgewater Triangle, all of these are represented by a different color, and we're going to be covering those, starting with the Alaskan Triangle. If you want to understand the zone system, you've got to start with the deadliest region in North America, the Alaskan Triangle, a stretch of wilderness larger than most countries, and home to more disappearances than anywhere else in the United States. The scale of the triangle is impressive. It's just over 200,000 square miles. It stretches from Anchorage to Juneau to Barrow, Alaska, and inside that triangle, more than 16,000 people have vanished since 1988 alone.
Dang.
But the key part you want to remember about that is vast sections of that is unmapped wilderness. There's mountain ranges, glaciers, volcanic fields, weather that changes in minutes, no cell phone coverage, very few roads, and no witnesses.
Right. So that's 16,000 people since 88. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not just a hotspot, dude. That's one of those statistical impossibilities that we talk about sometimes.
Now, granted, a bunch of those disappearances could probably be attributed to wildlife like bears or any other of the dangerous animals up there. Moose, we know moose have killed people, but the simple fact that there's so many and most of which are never found is the truly terrifying part.
Well, let's talk about why Zone Juliet is a lethal zone. What defines a lethal zone? We have things like fatal disappearances, unrecovered remains, aircraft vanishings, multi-agency involvement, redacted SAR reports, and high federal presence. We've seen every bit of that, out of that zone. So I think just by those definitions alone, that, and we could go on with other things that we could add, but just by those definitions alone, that obviously qualifies Zone Juliet as a lethal zone, in my opinion.
And Zone Juliet is the classification reserved for just one thing. Regions where people don't just disappear, they're never found.
and it definitely falls into that category.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Doc, you want to take us into the next one?
Yeah. So talking about disappearances. Let's talk about where Juliet really becomes unique. We're talking about aircraft disappearances, where these planes literally vanish from the air. There's no wreckage. There's no debris field. There's no emergency beacon. Those transponders. There's no supervisors. No survivors. There's no explanation. So some of the planes that you see up in Alaska quite a bit is small bush planes. You see those all over the place, charter flights, private aircraft, and even military aircraft, because there is Elmendorf, there's Cape, Fort Wainwright, or something like that, way up there. So they've got lots of military up there, so you may see some military crafts.
Well, back in the 40s or 50s, there was an aircraft, a DC-10, that went down with a U.S. congressman and several military figures on board, and they never found a trace of that, despite one of the single largest searches, aerial searches ever conducted. They never found a trace of the aircraft.
Wow. Well, one plane here and there, that's to be expected, but maybe a couple, but over decades, there's been dozens. I mean, that's not a weather system. That's a definite pattern, and reduces that statistical stuff, or increases the statistical probability.
Yep. But that's also where the lore deepens. The indigenous groups in the region have stories of things like tall, silent beings, the ridge watchers, forest spirits that take people, entities that mimic voices, beings that live in the glacial caves. These stories go back thousands of years, not just like 5 or 6 years. I mean, these things go back almost as far as their written history. So when these oldest stories in the region describe the same behavior that we see today, that goes, like I said, that's not folklore anymore. That's a continuity. That's something that's an established pattern that's not only repeatable, but it is being repeated.
Right. Yeah. And then that's not even talking about the cave systems. This ties directly. Let me bring up the image of the cave systems that we've talked about before. I know I've got it on there. Nope, there it is. Okay, this is a map comparing known cave systems in the lower 48 with the missing 411 map, and clearly you can see they line up. They line up almost perfectly. But when we dig into this, Alaska has active volcanoes. They've got lava tubes, glacial caves, ice caverns, subterranean rivers, and tons of collapsed mining tunnels. These create hidden corridors, shelters, migration routes, and places to hide remains. And when you overlay the cave system with the disappearance map, like I was just showed, it lines up about pretty much perfectly.
Yep, and then that's where the federal behavior in the zone theory becomes unavoidable, because let's talk about this. You got restricted airspace, some of the stuff Robbie was just talking about, environmental hazard closures, search and rescue reports that are sealed or heavily redacted if you do get them, military training zones that overlap the disappearance corridors, mapping restrictions, and then there are the drone bans in certain valleys. So what is the government treats the region like a hazard zone, but never says why it's a zone. So that's a zone. So you can't sit there and if you look at these patterns that we've established, what does that tell you? It's just like you're going to be talking about the colors, right? It fits the criteria, right?
Right.
Yep. But I think it's kind of important, since we're getting into this, to discuss why Juliet is different from Echo, because there are differences, and the importance for this to the audience is Zone Echo, which we've talked about, is in the Bitterroots. We've kind of established that whatever's there, it's an intelligent predator. With all the stories we've read from there, it's watching me. It's doing, the things that we've seen written in the journals. It went to a behavioral escalation. Started out watching, and then stalking around the camp. And then all of a sudden people are disappearing. And then people just being intercepted off the trail, like I can't remember which story it was, but the guy was a couple yards in front of his buddies, and then he goes around the corner and they never see him again.
Right.
But then you get to Zone Juliet in Alaska. There's no reported stalking, no reported of being watched or things like that. Or if there is, it's very, very minuscule compared to the other one. It's almost no escalation. It's 0 to 60 in 1.2 seconds. There's just disappearances, and it's finality. Like DA said earlier, you don't ever find these people. Like the wreckages of the planes are never found. The bodies that are never found of people who are gone missing. Mm-hmm. It's almost like Echo is a hunter's zone, and Juliet is more like a graveyard.
Yeah, where things go to die.
Right. So why is Juliet critical? Zone Juliet is one of only 2 zones where a critical activity level is reported. Why? It's got the highest fatality rate. No remains, no survivors, no explanations, no patterns of escape, and no behavioral intelligence. Just gone. Whatever's happening in the Alaskan Triangle, it doesn't play with its food. It just takes it. So the Alaskan Triangle is the deadliest zone in North America, but it's not the busiest. For that, we come right back here to my home in the Ozarks. Doc, you want to start us out on the Ozarks Triangle?
Absolutely, man. So let's call it Zone Golf. And so if the Alaskan Triangle is the deadliest, then the Ozarks Triangle is going to be the most crowded. It's so dense because in the Ozarks, it's not just one species, it's not just one phenomenon, it's not just a pattern, it's literally everything in there.
Yeah, and the Ozarks Triangle covers southern Missouri, northern Arkansas, and parts of eastern Oklahoma. So that's pretty big and spread out area. Probably not as big as the Alaskan area, but that's a pretty good size area. It's a region of deep hollows, limestone caves, dense forest, ridge lines that run like ribs across the land. And the key details for that is it's over 7,000 documented caves.
That's the documented ones. There's plenty
that's what I'd say. That's the ones that they know about, not the ones that they don't know about, which I'm sure there's probably as many, if not more, that they don't know about.
Yep.
It's karst terrain, which is a lot of sinkholes, underground rivers, hidden chambers. Just like there's hidden caves, there's other things that might not be a complete cave system, but there's other places for things to hide. Low population density, massive wildlife biomass, rugged, inaccessible terrain, and all 3 of us can attest to that.
Yeah.
It's one of the few places in America where you can walk a mile and drop 100 feet without realizing it. And it's just there's such thick vegetation and dense forest that you may walk up on a ravine and not even know it until you're on the way down.
Yeah. And the reason the Ozarks are unique is this is the heart of this segment here. Most regions have Bigfoot or dogman, visual anomalies or disappearances, one species or one pattern. But the Ozarks have all of them. This is the only region in the U.S. where multiple cryptid species overlap in the same ecological corridor. Species reported here are the Bigfoot, Dogman, Ozark Howler, upright canids, upright cat people, ridge watchers, shadow entities, unknown quadrupeds, and cave-dwelling humanoids. Most places have one apex predator. The Ozarks has a food chain that we don't even understand.
Right, and some of the major nodes, the core hotspots, these anchor this canon. Is the one we all had. I wasn't on that show that night, but the Drury-Mincy Conservation Area, because it's got deep hollows and high Bigfoot activity, bipedal cat creature sightings, just like DA was just saying, vocalizations, tree structures, and multi-species tracks.
Not to mention unexplained campground closures.
There you go. Yes, which, ironically enough, brings us into Joe Bald and Combs Ferry. So Dogman sightings, ridge watchers. So that's been a common theme we've seen throughout the show, and the vehicle pacing and very aggressive displays. And like I just said with a spoiler, Combs Ferry, those all have the same thing DA just said, which is what? Closed campgrounds. So in Combs Ferry, wow, howler reports. I forgot all about that, man. So that makes it even more terrifying.
That actually wasn't. It wasn't. There weren't directly in Combs Ferry, but in that area that leads out onto that same peninsula.
Yeah. So big and Bigfoot sightings too, because when DA and Robbie and Steve were there, they were getting things thrown at them, and so weird stuff there. Shadow entities, cave entrances, and multi-species overlap because there's like you just said, you've heard people talk about Dogman / Bigfoot there. And
there's one other that I forgot to put on here, and that's Big Bay. Big Bay Campground is also on Table Rock Lake. It's farther down towards Shell Knob, and it's pretty much identical with Combs Ferry. It's got howler reports in the area, Bigfoot sightings, shadowy creatures, caves throughout the area. And one thing that all of those campgrounds have in common, they're all in the Mark Twain National Forest.
And they all sit on top of massive cave systems there because those are basically the backbones of this Ozarks Triangle. And we've all been right in the heart of that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And this is where the Ozarks become zone golf. The Ozarks contain one of the largest karst systems in North America. Underground rivers, collapsed caverns, vertical shafts, hidden chambers, and unmapped tunnels, which is what we talked about earlier. Where you can be walking and all of a sudden, you're falling in a sinkhole or an unmarked or an uncharted tunnel, which can be dangerous in itself. Not to mention everything else we've just mentioned that you got to deal with over there. Mm-hmm. So when you overlay the like DA's got the picture of, when you overlay the cave map with cryptid sightings, the clusters sit directly on top of the cave networks, which is something that we've talked about for, like DA said, about 3 years now. It's not random, but it's their habitat. And that's something that we've kind of almost beat a dead horse with, thinking that these things live a lot of their lives, in caves, subterranean. Well,
right.
This just kind of, strengthens that.
Okay.
But if you look right here in the middle of that map, that big circular cluster right in the center, that's the Ozarks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me ask you this. You've said it before on the show, DA, but just for the chat out there, how much of our cave system in the United States have they explored? Like documented?
They estimate between 2 and 5%.
2 and 5%, people. 2 and 5%.
But they're discovering deeper caves all the time, so that number actually may go down as they discover more and deeper caves.
Yeah, that's kind of fascinating.
When they first started exploring the Mammoth Cave systems, they believed they had explored about 5 to 7% of it, and then echo soundings discovered that they connect to other underground cave systems that run from Maine to Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico and possibly into Mexico. So that means that went from about 5% down to probably 0.5%.
That's fascinating. Holy crap! All the way down to New Mexico.
At least into New Mexico, maybe farther south into Mexico.
Well, didn't you say that when you were a kid, y'all let some die out or something like that? Or
that happened at Bennett Springs, where we were at that night after we left Moon Valley. They released dye packs into the spring there, where it disappears underground, and they were tracking it. And they had very specific radiocarbons in the dye packs, and I believe it was the U.S. Forestry Service was monitoring it. I can't remember, maybe it was National Park Service, but they were monitoring it to see where it would come up, and they had monitoring stations all over the planet. And it finally came up 6 months later in Alaska.
That's amazing, dude.
They did that in the mid-'70s, I believe it was.
That's so cool. Well, the cave system, is one thing, and then there's all this overlap in there. So zone golf is defined by that overlap, And some of the behaviors you'll see is Bigfoot trackways crossing dogman trackways. So they're talking about multi-species behavior here. Higher vocalizations in Bigfoot territory, shadow entities near dogman sightings, excuse me, and pattern or predation patterns that are inconsistent with known wildlife. Just like
That'd be the Missouri tree trout and deer parks and
Ex-
trees.
Exactly. Just like out in here in Meeker, Colorado, same type of thing, unknown canine species. So, and there's multiple species using the same ridge lines along the same, what we would say if you're a hunter, it's a game path, right? A game trail.
Right.
Yep.
So in most of these regions, these cryptids seem to avoid each other, right? But in the Ozarks, they actually coexist.
Which is weird.
It is weird.
Robbie, you want to take that one?
Yep. So the region, this is the historical continuity that we're talking about. And the region has centuries of reports. You've heard us pull up stories from, back from I think that we started in the 50s when we was talking about Drury Mincy. So you've heard us pull up these stories, indigenous stories of watchers in the hills, frontier journals describing upright wolves, 1800s newspaper reporting of wild man. That was the big thing back then, before the term Bigfoot got coined. The early 1900s accounts across the Ozarks of the howler, modern sightings of dogman and Bigfoot. So when a region has the same reports for 300 years, that kind of floats out of the realm of folklore and gets into, here's that word again, continuity.
Yep.
Right.
Because it's there we go again, a repeatable pattern, and it is being repeated. It's not something that's just, you heard about from stories a couple hundred years ago. The same type of stuff still happening today.
And that's why the Ozarks are zone golf. Zone golf is a multi-species anomaly zone. And the criteria for that are multiple species, overlapping territories, shared corridors, shared cave systems, shared ridge lines, shared hunting grounds, and shared migration routes. The Ozarks are the only region in the U.S. where zone golf classification fits perfectly. It's not one creature, it's an entire ecosystem.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So let's talk about the activity level. So it's got zone golf is a high activity zone because, and we've talked about this on the show many, many times, it's one of the highest frequency sighting areas in the United States. So frequent sightings, multiple species encounters, and DA's experienced that. Aggressive displays, vocalizations, the trackways, and then the shadow watchers, the anomalies they've been finding, in caves. And there's also, and this breaks back to what Robbie was saying about the oral history, is the historical consistency of it all, because not only oral history, but documented history back in the 1800s, even 1700s, they've been talking about seeing all this stuff here. So if Zone Echo is the most intelligent and Zone Juliet is the most lethal, then it would stand to reason, because of all this stuff with the multi-species, that Zone Golf is the most populated. Wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah.
I agree. Yeah. So the Ozarks Triangle is, for lack of a better term, I would say it's a crossroads. Mm-hmm. It's a convergence. And we've talked about this before, multiple species in the same area. It's a place where the wilderness is crowded with things that we don't understand, because we've said it. We said it once. We said it a million times. These are not things that we completely and totally understand. But not every triangle is crowded, and some are pretty quiet. They watch from the tree lines. There's not a whole lot of dangerous behavior. There is some, but not a whole lot. But what we're going to talk about next is the Bridgewater Triangle.
And the Bridgewater Triangle is designated as Zone Charlie. Not every triangle is violent. Not every hotspot is predatory. Some places don't chase you, they just watch. And nowhere is that more true than with the Bridgewater Triangle. The Bridgewater Triangle sits in north and southeastern Massachusetts. It's a 200 square mile region of swamps, forests, wetlands, and colonial era towns. The key features are Hockomock Swamp, where a lot of people have had strange encounter stories, Freetown and Fall River State Forest, Tauntaun River Basin, dense wetlands, and fog-heavy lowlands. It's one of the oldest documented paranormal regions in the United States.
Well, that's cool. So, what makes Bridgewater different is defined by the visual anomaly. So, unlike Alaska, which is lethal, or the Ozarks, which is multi-species, the Bridgewater has these visual anomalies. So the paranormal stuff, shadow figures, tall silhouettes, maybe the tree line watchers, entities that appear and vanish, lights in the swamp. I've heard stories about that stuff. Figures pacing at the edge of the vision, and also creatures that never fully reveal themselves. So it's not a physical danger there necessarily in Bridgewater as much as it seems to be things that wear on your fear. So the psychological aspect. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the shadow figures. That's a term that's kind of come up all throughout what we've been talking about so far. This is the core of Zone Charlie. Witnesses describe tall, thin silhouettes. They're standing motionless at the edge of a swamp, just watching, not approaching, not fleeing, just simply observing, which, can be kind of eerie and disconcerting. You're standing there and look, something like that's just watching you. They aren't creatures that chase you. They don't roar. They don't attack. They just exist. But that might be worse. Like I was saying, I mean, that can be a little unnerving, having something just like that, just judging you, standing there watching you, and you don't know what's going on.
Yeah. And, that's one of the craziest parts about that, the watcher behavior. And Zone Charlie is kind of defined by it. Non-contact entities, visual presences, no tracks, no physical evidence, not aggressive, but no vocalizations, and no pursuit. It's just kind of the exact opposite of Zones Delta and Echo. But in the Bridgewater, the wilderness doesn't hunt you. It just studies you.
Yeah, and that's the thing, man, is because the history of this area goes back, several centuries, because like Robbie had talked about earlier, the indigenous stories talk about these watchers in the swamp, and then colonial accounts of these dark figures, shadow figures, and in the 1800s they started talking about phantom lights, and then in the 20th century sightings of tall men in the trees, and then modern reports of shadow entities. So when this region has all of this, all these same sightings for over 400 years, that's not a fad. That's a pattern, just like what Robbie's been talking about. Continuity, patterns. That's what we're looking at.
Yep. So let's get into why is Bridgewater Zone Charlie. Zone Charlie equals visual distortion zone. So the criteria for that would be entity seen but never approached, which we talked about. Shadow figures, check that box. Tree line watchers, also checked. Visual anomalies, lights in the swamp, things like that. No aggression, just standing and watching. No physical evidence. Obviously, if there's a shadow creature, it's probably not going to be a lot of physical evidence. No disappearances of people, which have not been reported. So Zone Charlie is the classification for regions where the wilderness doesn't touch you, but it lets you know you're not alone. If that zone, if the zone doesn't want to hurt you, it just wants to see you. And I think that from what we've talked about, that kind of checks those boxes. But I also go back to what I said earlier, that can be almost kind of worse in a way. Because you really,
at least more unnerving.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't know what the purpose is.
Yeah, right. You know something's there, it's pacing you or whatever. It just wants you to know it's there. Kind of like we talked about as a territorial thing. So
oh yeah.
You know,
And the activity level there is moderate to high. Why Charlie is not high or critical, because there are no disappearances, no predation that we know of, no aggressive attacks, and no multiple species overlap. But there is a high frequency of sightings over multiple decades with large numbers of witnesses and strong visual presence. Zone Charlie isn't dangerous, it's just really, really unsettling.
so the Bridgewater Triangle, it seems to be more like it's a very shadowy place where the wilderness just watches from the tree line and waits around. But not every zone is, unfortunately, is content to watch. Some zones push back, and when they push back hard. So that brings us into the next segment, which is the Texas Dogman Triangle.
And this is one of my favorites. And the Texas Dogman Triangle is listed as Zone Delta. Some places watch you, some places warn you, and some places chase you. The Texas Dogman Triangle is one of the most aggressive cryptid corridors in the United States, and it's in the heart of Zone Delta. You want me to go on there? Or you want to take this?
I can take it. So defining the Texas Dogman Triangle. The Texas Dogman Triangle stretches across central and east Texas, as you can see on the map there. It's a corridor of farmland, pine forest, river bottoms, and rural highways. Dense pine thickets, river systems, rural roads with low visibility, high livestock density, and large stretches of unmonitored land. It's the perfect environment for a territorial predator.
And unlike the visual aspect, psychological aspect of Bridgewater or the multi-species anomaly area in the Ozarks, this triangle, the Texas Triangle, the Dogman Triangle, there is defined by one thing and one thing only, and that's aggression. So vehicle pacing, roadside charges, farm predation, rich in livestock. So they have a lot of livestock kills, territorial displays. And then in some cases, which is pretty scary, is direct pursuit. So they're not watching you here. They're not just you're not just disappearing. They're going to be in your face. So this is going to be out and out confrontation zone.
Yep. And so speaking of the in your face and the confrontational zone, let's get into the Dogman behavior profile. Witnesses in this area consistently, just here we go again with the consistently describe upright canids, about 6 to 8 feet tall, long limbs, forward-facing eyes, canine-like muzzle, digitigrade legs, massive chest, territorial aggression. Behaviorally, they charge vehicles, like Doc just said, paces alongside cars at 30 to 40 miles per hour, stalks livestock, which we talked about earlier. They approach homes. You hear growls, snarls, and displays of dominance, and they don't flee when they're confronted. So this is the only cryptid in the U.S. that consistently approaches humans. You look at that, Bigfoot's, some approach, some just kind of out. Same thing with a howler. You've heard some of them approach, some of them off in the distance, but consistently over the, you may have 1, 2, 3, or 4 dogman sightings out of 50 or 100 to where, like DAs, it just saw them and ran off. For the most part, they are going to approach you. They're, whether it be curiosity, whether it be predation, what territorial, whatever, they're known to be the kind of cryptids that, as Doc put earlier, going to get up in your face.
Yeah, which is, sorry, go ahead, bud.
I was going to say this is why this is a zone, not just a hotspot.
Right.
Zone Delta is an aggression zone. Repeated aggressive encounters, multi-decade consistency, same morphology, same behavior, same territory, same pursuit patterns. Zone Delta is the classification for regions where the wilderness doesn't just watch, it pushes back.
Well, that's important too, because it's not just a one single location in this Texas Dogman Triangle. It's a corridor. It's a movement corridor, and so it connects the pine forest out in the eastern Texas, what we call the Big Thicket, central Texas farmland. It connects river bottoms, rural highways, abandoned oil roads, and old logging roads, old logging trails up there. Because once they clear cut this area out, they have the roads there. So these are conduits, man. So the predator uses this land the same way wolves use any kind of mountain pass. It's a path, and it doesn't just stop in Texas, which is it really crazy how big their territory is.
Yeah. And that just leads us into the northern extension. It's where the zone theory expands. The Texas Dogman Corridor connects northward into Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, and the Ozarks Triangle of Zone Golf. So imagine that.
Yeah.
This creates a Southern Aggression Corridor Delta, or Southern Aggression Corridor, which is Delta, and a Northern Multi-Species Corridor, which is Golf. So Zone Delta and Zone Golf touch, and where they overlap, that's where the activity spikes. And
I think that where they overlap is right there where we were at with Combs Ferry, Joe Bald, Drury Mincy.
Right. Going into what used to be the territories, in that area on the border.
The Boston Mountains of northern Arkansas, where we get a lot of aggressive encounter stories.
Dang, dude. That's crazy.
So this is why Delta isn't Gulf. And this is crucial for clarity. Zone Golf, which is the Ozarks corridor, is multi-species, Bigfoot, Dogman, Howler, cave systems, and overlapped. And Zone Delta in Texas, single species, Dogman dominant, highly aggressive, territorial behavior. Zone Delta is not a multi-species ecosystem. It's a single apex predator holding territory. And where it overlaps with the Ozarks Triangle, that's where things start getting dicey.
Mm-hmm. And so the activity level, this activity level is high. It's a critical level. So why is Zone Delta nearly critical? Well, it's the high aggression you just spoke of, the high frequency of the encounters, high consistency, a high proximity to humans, because this is a very populous area, along with, due to the livestock, there's a high predation level of high predation on the livestock, along with pursuit behaviors. But there's no mass disappearances, there's no aircraft vanishings, there's no echo level intelligence. So it seems like Zone Deltas in the continental United States is the most aggressive zone singularly.
So that brings, the Texas Dogman Triangle is a predator's corridor. We've kind of established that. A place where wilderness doesn't hide, it charges. But aggression isn't the only danger, and some places don't chase you. They don't roar. They don't attack. They just take you. No warning, no threat level behavior. So next, we're going to talk about the missing 411 and the disappearance zones.
When people talk about the missing 411, they talk about the mystery, the strangeness, the cases that don't make sense. But tonight we're not looking at individual stories. We're looking at a pattern. And this map I've just brought up is clearly delineating that pattern. What the missing 411 isn't. Missing 411 isn't about every missing person. It's not about crime. It's not about hikers who got lost. It's not about people who wanted to disappear. It's about cases that share a specific repeating characteristics. Those characteristics show up in the same places over and over again. Doc, can't hear you. You're muted, buddy.
Sorry, my dog was snoring. The core 411 signatures that they're patterns. They're patterns that define a 411 case. So number one is no track. So no foot marks, no footprints, no drag marks, no sign of a struggle, no trail of belongings. Number two is there's no scent trail. And dogs can't track it because there's no scent. Or y'all heard us talk about some of the stories. Dogs refuse to track it. They flat out refuse to go. Or what we've heard a common theme is they follow the trail until they just stop and don't go anymore, or they can't find any more scent. And no remains usually. Now, in most cases we've seen, there's no bones, there's no gear, no clothing, no trace. And if they have found them from the encounters we've talked about too, is skeletal remains are usually found in areas that have been previously searched just by the ranch. Numerous times, and also remains appear deliberately arranged. And number 4 is sudden vanishings. The person was visible, then not within seconds or minute. Terrain that doesn't match the disappearance. There's no cliffs, no rivers, no hazards, and no reason for the person to vanish. And so these aren't accidents. They're not mistakes. They're actually just being removed.
Boys, we got about 4 minutes, so I think we can cover one more unit.
Okay.
Well, missing 411 cases cluster in the Yosemite, Smoky Mountains, the Adirondacks, the Rockies, the Bitterroots, the Green Mountains, the Cascades, the Ozarks, and the Four Corners region. When you overlay those clusters within the triangles, they line up perfectly. And I think that's something that we've hit on consistently. There's that word again in this show is lining up how these maps line up with disappearances, sightings, cave systems. You start overlaying all this stuff, you get that. What's that P word again, Doc? You get a pattern, the P word.
Yeah. And what does science use? Science uses patterns, man.
Yep.
That's right.
Patterns that are repeatable and observable and repeatable.
Yeah.
Patterns reveal behavior. They reveal consistent things that we can use to not only predict where these things are going, but their behaviors.
Which is where this cave system connection comes in. And that's where the map that Robbie was just talking about becomes undeniable, because when you overlay those 411 clusters with the cave maps, where do they sit?
It's up on your screen now.
When it's up there, where do they sit? They're sitting right on top of those cave networks. And so caves matter because they're hidden corridors. They have vertical shafts. They have underground rivers, so there's a passageway there. They're lava tubes because they're created from all the old ancient lava activity. There's still other geothermal stuff still going on there. Ancient passageways and places where this is the best hidey hole in the world, and no remains are ever going to be found. So it's not a random thing. It's geological.
Absolutely. And we are just about to the point where we have to take a quick break to pay some bills, as Race would say. We are going to have a quick word from our sponsors here in just a moment. We appreciate you guys sticking with us, and I hope you guys take the moment to stretch your legs, top off your drink, walk the dog, go hit the bathroom, whatever it is you need to do, and hope you guys will be right back with us. And maybe stop by and check out our affiliates. You guys know who they are. They're popping up periodically in the chat. We are probably not going to go over the affiliates tonight. They'll be just popping up in the chat along with all the author links. So hope you guys will support them as well. So check them out. Again, we have so much material to cover tonight. We're going to be kind of breaking the pattern because we really feel like we're breaking this wide open. So, folks, we will be right back here in just a minute, and we're going to take a quick pause to pay some bills, and we will be right back.
Hey everybody, this is Kerry Pocket Doc Davis from Dark Angel Medical, and you are listening to DA Ex Machina with DARoberts. You may recognize me or some of my products from Dark Angel Medical in some of the Apex Predator, Lakeview Man, and Wild Hunt books, and you can get those products at www.darkangelmedical.com, along with training classes on how to use those products and save a life. Shoot us an email at info@darkangelmedical.com and be the difference.
In a world where monsters still walk the earth, one author dares to face them. From the brutal cryptid horror of the Apex Predator series to the Ozark legends that stalk the night in Lakeview Man, from the elite warriors of codename Wild Hunt to the relentless investigations of the Nightmare Hunter, and the frontier terror of Dark Frontiers. When the dead rise, the Ragnarok Rising saga unleashes pure zombie apocalypse fury. And across the stars, war rages in the Lost Legion and man's marauders. And in the realm of myth and steel, the world of Vanguard calls to those born for legend. Cryptids, zombies, sci-fi warfare, epic fantasy. This is the universe of DARoberts. The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to Research a Haunted House can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unexmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unexmedia.com or amazon.com.
And we are back. Thank you guys for sticking with us, and we are going to be jumping right back into this. When we started discussing that, we were discussing the cave system connections and why it's important. But the environmental pattern is just as important. The 411 cases often occur near boulder fields, granite outcroppings, dense forests, ridge systems, water sources, cave entrances, and old mining tunnels. These are the same environmental features that define the zones.
So the government response pattern to this is where the zone theory becomes unavoidable. In a lot of the 411 cases, clusters, you see trail rerouting where there used to be a trail, now there's not, and it goes in another direction. Drone bans, restricted mapping, the search and rescue reports are sealed, environmental hazard closures. We just talked about this, right? Federal agencies taking over the searches, and helicopters with thermal imaging, and no public explanation, or they always say it's an active case. So when the government treats a region like a hazard zone, and they never explain why, then that's a zone. That's one of the zones we're talking about.
Well, let's get into why Foxtrot, why they've gone with designation Foxtrot. It's classified as a disappearance zone. Criteria for that are sudden vanishings, not things where, somebody, has been out there for a while and, just didn't come back. These are things like we talked about people walking around a corner and then, poof. Mm-hmm. So no tracks, no scent trails, no remains, no signs of a struggle, no logical explanation, multi-decade consistency. There's the word again. And same geographic corridors. So Zone Foxtrot is a classification for regions where people don't just get lost, they're removed. And the pattern's national when you start talking about that. So that's kind of a scary zone to think about.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And the big difference between Zone Foxtrot and Zone Echo, and pay attention because this will come up again in segment 10. Zone Echo is primarily the Bitterroot Mountains. Intelligent predator, stalking, watching, interception, and behavioral escalation. Zone Foxtrot, which is the 411 clusters, there's no stalking, there's no watching, there's no escalation, they just vanish. Where Zone Echo hunts, Zone Foxtrot just extracts.
So the missing 411 isn't a list of strange cases. It's a map. And it's a map of places where the wilderness takes people and doesn't give them back. And nowhere that we have talked about is clearer than in Vermont, in the Bennington Triangle.
Let me bring up the map of the Bennington Triangle. There it is.
So if you want to understand disappearance zones, you got to start in Vermont. The Bennington Triangle isn't the biggest, it isn't the deadliest, but it's the clearest. It's the purest example of what we call a disappearance pattern.
So defining the Bennington Triangle is the interesting portion. The Bennington Triangle sits in southwestern Vermont. It's centered around Glastonbury Mountain, an abandoned town that's been completely reclaimed by the forest. The key features of the area are dense old-growth forests, steep ridge lines, boulder fields, swamps and bogs, loads of unmarked trails, and a mountain with no remaining population. It's one of the few places in America where an entire town was just abandoned and never went back. And I'm not including gold rush towns where they abandoned them because their load played out. These were abandoned and never really explained why.
Well, I mean, and so let's talk about the core disappearances. There were 5 of them, and these are what's known as the backbone of that triangle. Number 1 is the Midi Rivers in 1945. It was an experienced hunter who vanished while walking ahead of his group. No tracks, no remains, no scent trail. So it's like poof, gone. Number 2 was Paula Weldon. We've talked about her. 1946, college student, last seen on a trail. They did a massive search and no evidence was ever found. And number 3 is James Tedford in 1949. He was a World War II veteran, vanished from inside a bus. His luggage was still on board, and witnesses had seen him just moments before. Number 4 was Paul Jepson in 1950. 8-year-old boy. Dogs tracked him to a road and then stopped, and there were no remains ever found. And then 5th and last was Frida Langer in 1950. So the only case where remains were actually found, and the body was discovered in an area that was previously searched, and there's no cause of death. So these 5 cases occurred in that there was 5 disappearances in 5-year period, and they form the spine of the Bennington Triangle, and every single one of them fits the zone foxtrot pattern of removal.
So signatures in the Bennington. Bennington is a perfect match for the missing 411 profile of sudden vanishings, no tracks, no scent trails, almost no remains, because we did find one set of remains, but no struggles, no logical explanation, and multi-decades of consistency.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the forest just swallowed them whole, like we said, with the exception of that one.
Right.
And the environmental pattern there becomes very, very prevalent. Bennington contains boulder fields, just like the missing 411, granite outcroppings, dense forests, swamps, cave entrances, old mining tunnels, and steep ridge lines. These are the same environmental features you find in Yosemite, the Smokies, the Adirondacks, the Rockies, and the Bitterroots. Bennington isn't an outlier. It's a template.
It is. And then the cave system connection again happens here, and that makes this map undeniable because Bennington sits on limestone caves, glacial cavities, abandoned mining tunnels, and a number of underground streams, which create a lot of hidden corridors and vertical shafts and places where nothing will ever be found. So when you overlay that cave map with a disappearance map, Bennington's, big flashing light. It goes off, man. It goes off. It's like a freaking lighthouse. It's a beacon.
Yep. There's also the silent extraction behavior. Zone foxtrot defined as removal without confrontation. It's like we've talked about. No signs of struggle, no tracks, no, nothing like that. So patterns include no stalking, no watching, no aggression, no vocalization, no pursuit, no evidence. So whatever happens in zone foxtrot, it doesn't warn you that it's about to happen. It don't chase you. It doesn't roar. It just takes you. And I think we've talked. We've covered that on several of those cases we've talked about in that area.
Right.
Yes.
And why Bennington is the archetype. Bennington is the clearest example of zone foxtrot because the cases are all well documented, the disappearances are clean, the terrain matches the pattern, the timeline is tight, ranging from 1945 to 1950, the behavior is consistent, and the region has no predators capable of these removals. Bennington is the purest foxtrot zone in the country. It's the blueprint.
Yeah, and the government response is very subtle in this, but it's also very glaring. It's very important to pay attention to this because there were trails that were quietly rerouted. There were mapping restrictions done, and there was limited search and rescue transparency, no official explanation, and there were no long-term investigations. And that town of Glastonbury was never resettled, and not once, not by anyone.
So, the Bennington Triangle, I guess we can list as the heart of zone foxtrot. It's a place where people will vanish without sound or without struggle, without a trace. Bennington isn't alone, though. There are other foxtrot zones, bigger ones and more dangerous ones. Next, we're going to talk about Yosemite and the Smokies, the Adirondacks, and the Rockies, which we all know a lot of that's in the Appalachian Trail, which is very
They're all in national parks.
Yep, that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yosemite, the Smokies, the Adirondacks, and the Rockies are the major foxtrot zones. Bennington is the blueprint, but it's not the biggest, it's not the most active, and it's not the most dangerous, because across the U.S. there are other regions, larger, older, and far more active, where the same disappearance pattern repeats. When you map the missing 411 clusters across the country, 4 regions stand out above the others: Yosemite, the Great Smoky Mountains, the Adirondacks, and the Rocky Mountains. These aren't random wilderness areas. They are the largest, most consistent disappearance clusters in North America, and every one of them matches Zone Foxtrot's signature.
Yeah. Just like Yosemite is one of them. It's the largest. That's out in California. It's the largest foxtrot zone in the United States, and has more missing 411 cases than any other national park. And the pattern here, again, with patterns and consistency, right, is unmistakable. So granite domes, boulder fields, sheer cliffs, dense forests, hidden crevices, waterfalls, cave systems, old mining tunnels. So those are some of the geographical features. Now, what are we seeing here? What patterns? The vanishings. They're sudden. There's no tracks, no scent trail, no remains, no gear recovered, and dogs literally stop and refuse to track. So Yosemite is like the foxtrot zone turned up to 11. So we broke the 10 button, and we're all the way up to 11 on here. So that's Yosemite.
And this brings us to my backyard, the Great Smoky Mountains, Tennessee and North Carolina. This is the most accessible foxtrot zone. The Smokies are the most visited national park in America. Mm-hmm. They have one of the highest disappearance rates also. Key features of the Smokies are dense fog, that's why they're called the Great Smoky Mountains, very thick underbrush. We've talked about that before. I've been up that place many times, so has DA. I think you even have too, Doc. Yep. That's a very, very dense forest area. Very steep ridges. I talked about that. Old growth forest, cave systems, rapid weather shifts. We joke a lot about you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes. It's really that way up there. Mm-hmm. So what patterns do we see in the Great Smokies? Well, we've children and adult vanishing without sight, or vanishing within sight of adults. That story we've talked about several times. A little boy was there, and
Dennis Martin.
Dennis Martin saw the big hairy man take him off. Tracks that stopped suddenly. We just talked about that one the other night when the thing jumped off the embankment. Dogs unable to track. Seen that, and that's a very prevalent one. And here again, no remains found. So they share all that with Yosemite. The Smokies are a foxtrot zone hiding in plain sight. Like we said, it's the most visited national park in the United States of America, and has a very high number of people that are just poof gone.
And between the Smokies and the Appalachian Trail, look how many disappearances are up there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that leads us to the Adirondack Mountains of New York. This is the northeastern foxtrot zone. The Adirondacks are 6 million acres of wilderness, larger than Yellowstone, Everglades, Glacier, and Grand Canyon combined. The key features there are massive forests, swamps, granite ridges, remote lakes, harsh winters, and the patterns are of solo hikers disappearing, campsites left intact with nobody gone, nothing out of place, with just the people gone. Yeah, everything left behind and them just gone. No tracks, no remains, and no gear left behind. It's Bennington just scaled up.
Well, and the Bennington Triangle or the Adirondacks bring us into the Rocky Mountains, my backyard. I can actually look out my window here and see Pikes Peak. So, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana. This is the high altitude foxtrot zone, and the Rockies are a different kind of foxtrot zone because it's higher here, it's colder here, it's more vertical. The mountains are younger. So out in the Smokies, those are very old mountains. Out here, they're newer. So more vertical. The key features geographically here are alpine forests. You've got sheer cliffs, boulder fields, glacial valleys, cave systems, and lots and lots and lots of old mining tunnels. Now the patterns we see here: experienced hikers gone, vanishing. No tracks, no scent trail, no remains, no gear, and no logical explanation to them at all. The Rockies are where foxtrot needs an oxygen mask. It meets altitude up
there. So the shared behavioral signatures from all these that we run into, all four regions share the same foxtrot traits of sudden vanishings, no tracks, no scent trails, no remains, no struggle, no predator signs, no gear recovered, dogs refusing to track, and multi-decades of consistency. You can't say these are accidents. Can't say they're mistakes. They're extractions.
And then we get back to the cave system overlay. This isn't just where we're blowing smoke up your kilt, as Doc likes to say. But at this point, y'all should start feel the pattern clicking here. All four regions that we have just talked about set on massive cave systems. It's all karst terrain, lava tubes, glacial activity, and lots of abandoned mining tunnels. When you overlay the cave map with the disappearance map, the clusters sit directly on top of the cave networks. It's the same pattern we saw in Bennington, just bigger.
And why these are foxtrot zones, not echoes, right? This is crucial for clarity in the segments that we're doing. So zone echo is up in the, let's say, the Bitterroots, right? The Bitterroot Mountains were Teddy Roosevelt. Intelligent predator, stalking, watching, interception, and behavioral escalation. Sounds like the Teddy Roosevelt story, yeah? The Bauman story, the Bauman account. So zone foxtrot, the 411 clusters up there, there's no stalking, no watching, no escalation, no pursuit, just gone, disappearance. So what we're going to look at, we're kind of look at it like this differentiate it. Echo hunts, but foxtrot just takes them away, just extracts. Gone. See ya. Crazy, man.
So in closing, from what we've learned on these zones, Yosemite, the Smokies, the Adirondacks, and the Rockies, they aren't isolated mysteries. You know, they're not. They're major foxtrot zones, largest disappearance corridors in North America. And when disappearances reach this scale, the government notices. So next, we're going to start talking about the federal response.
So the government's role in all this is kind of interesting. When disappearances reach a certain scale, when the patterns repeat, when the land itself becomes unpredictable, the government steps in every time. And the way they step in tells us everything. What the government doesn't do, the government never says, this is a dangerous region, this is a hotspot, this is a pattern, this is a zone. They don't warn the public, they don't acknowledge the clusters, they don't publish risk maps, and they certainly don't release the full SAR reports. They don't explain anything, but they act like they know what's going on.
Yeah, and one of the clearest things, one of the clearest behavioral indicators we've seen is the trail rerouting. And so the patterns we've seen of that is these trails quietly moved away from certain valleys. There was a trail, but now there's a new trail, and the other one's not there. Old trails closed off. forbidden without, to close without explanation. There's a lot of that out here in Colorado. New trails routed around cave systems, so they're not even coming in contact with them. Seasonal closures that become permanent. I've even seen it out here for reforestation and things like that. I'm like, dude, there's plenty of trees out here. So they close those trails off for whatever reason they feel necessary, they deem necessary. And the maps are updated without any kind of public announcement, because one day it may show this, and then all of a sudden it's uploaded with a new map. And next time you plug your GPS in or you plug into a satellite, there it is, and it's completely different. So when a trail is rerouted away from a disappearance cluster, that's not a coincidence. That's risk management right there. That's mitigation. That's what that is.
Sorry, if I start jerking around, all of a sudden Harley's trying to crawl behind my chair. I don't know why. When 100 pounds of dog tries to squeeze in about 6 inches of space between my chair and the wall, he's going to dump me on the floor if he ain't careful.
But what Doc was just talking about brings us into another really major red flag.
You've talked about this, really.
Yep, I was about to say this is something we've talked about many times. And like I said, it's a major red flag. In many of the Foxtrot and Echo zones, drones are banned. Airspace is restricted. You have wildlife protection is a lot of the cited reasoning for it, which, I don't know how a drone, causes any harm to a deer or an elk or something like that. But enforcement is usually strict. We've talked about that, drones getting shot down if they're in an area they're not supposed to be in.
Well, if you cross those electronic fences, you can go to jail.
Yeah.
Yep.
Drones are one of the few tools that the public has access to that can see what the government sees, and they don't like that. And in these zones, drones are usually the first thing to go.
Yep.
Like we said, you fly in the wrong spot, you out a couple grand for however much your drone costs you. It's a modern version of don't look behind the curtain, the old Wizard of Oz thing. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
You can't see what's going on behind the curtain.
Exactly. And that leads us to redacted search and rescue reports. Search and rescue reports often contain entire pages that have been blacked out, missing timestamps, coordinates that have been removed, missing witness statements, missing ranger notes, and missing environmental data. When a hiker goes missing, you expect transparency, but in the zone, all you get's redaction.
Yeah, and the big catch-all phrase that they seem to use is environmental hazard. So used for, and I just talked about this, man, trail closures for like reforestation. That was one of the big things I've seen out here. Area restrictions for whatever reason, mapping limitations, seasonal shutdowns, off limits valleys. But the term is this always vague. It never specifies, is it closed for a wildfire? Is it closed for weather? Is it closed for terrain or flooding or fire risk? It's just, their way of saying, environmental hazards. It's something's happening here. We don't want you to know, and we're not going to tell you what it is, even if you do ask. So, you could have slides and things like that, but those are up there for specific reasons. What we're talking about is a generalized, hey, this area is shut because of an environmental hazard. So in most cases, if it's something specific, they will definitely put it on there. It's interesting though.
And leading into that, usually when you see stuff like Doc was just talking about, you're going to see multi-agency involvement. Like if something goes on in my city, it's usually just my department that handles it. But you get some of this stuff going on, and a lot of times you're going to see the National Park Service, the U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, state police, local sheriffs, and occasionally a military presence. So a lot of times you'll see everybody I just listed in the area for one thing. So when multiple agencies show up for a single missing hiker, it's not typically protocol. That's what we like to call containment.
Yeah, we've talked about that too.
Right, exactly. And then you start looking at mapping restrictions. When we were talking about Zone Echo the first time, there was a guy who was mapping fire routes for blocking forest fires, and they told him stay the hell out of there. You can't go in here and map. He lost all his permits, and they kicked him out of the area. So this is subtle, but very important. In certain zones, high-resolution maps are completely unavailable. Like what we discovered when we were looking at the Google Maps of the Bitterroots. Satellite imagery that's publicly available is often blurred, just like it is in the Bitterroots. Terrain data completely incomplete. Cave systems are omitted, and old mining tunnels are just completely erased. And that's one of the things we know about the Bitterroots is there were multiple logging camps and mining camps in that area, and yet none of them are on any of the maps. So when the map doesn't match the land, it's not an accident.
Yeah, it's just them erasing it, and
Right.
it's something else. That's always big is not only do they say it's not here, we're not going to tell you why it's not here anymore. And that's what we really want to talk about is they don't explain the zones for one reason. They can't. Well, because why can't they? Well, because there's no scientific framework out there that's been established. There's no public safety explanation. There's no way to warn people. And if they did, what's it going to cause? Mass chaos, mass panic, and that's no way they can control whatever narrative it is. And there's no way to admit that they don't understand. So basically, if they can't control it, the big thing is with this is if they can't control it, they're just going to put a lid on it so nobody else knows about it either. So they just throw it into a top secret folder and classify it. That way, nobody gets it. And if you did, it's going to be all black lines.
Yep. So, the government doesn't acknowledge the zones, but they behave as if the zones are real, which is telling in itself. They don't acknowledge them, but they definitely acknowledge that they are real by the way they act. Their behavior is the clearest evidence that we have. But to understand the zones themselves, we need to understand the difference between the two most important ones. Next, we're going to look at Foxtrot versus Echo.
And folks, remember earlier when I said pay attention because it would come up again? It's fixing to. This is how Foxtrot differs from Echo. Up to this point, we've talked about disappearances, we've talked about clusters, and we've talked about the Foxtrot zones. The places where people vanish without a sound, without struggle, and without a trace. But there's one zone that doesn't behave like a foxtrot. One zone that doesn't extract. One zone that doesn't remove. One zone that hunts. So the two most important zones for us to understand is Zone Foxtrot and Zone Echo. They're the backbone of the entire zone theory. They're the two most widespread, most consistent, and most dangerous classifications, but they're not the same. Foxtrot is disappearances, Echo is predatory intelligence, and the difference between them is the difference between being taken and being hunted.
Which brings us to the disappearance zone. So Zone Foxtrot, the behavior here is sudden vanishings. There's no tracks, no scent trail, no remains, no struggle, no vocalizations, no pursuit, no stalking, no escalation, no warning. That's the big thing is there's no warning because it's silent, it's clean, it's just removal. It's extracting them. And those are what we just talked about in Yosemite, the Smokies, the Adirondacks, the Rockies, the Bennington Triangle, and multiple other dozens of other smaller clusters. So it's like the wilderness. Foxtrot's like the wilderness is swallowing people completely and gone.
So the counterpoint of that, Zone Echo is classified as the behavioral escalation zone. Echo behavior is classified as stalking, watching, pacing, shadowing, interception, vocalization, tree breaks, rock throws, territorial displays, behavioral escalation.
And when we apply that, I really think Combs Ferry qualifies as a Zone Echo.
Yeah,
I agree.
I would concur. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and simple way to put that is Echo doesn't extract, Echo engages, and we've been engaged multiple times in those areas.
Yep.
So I think that in itself classifies it. And Echo consists of the Bitterroot Mountains, Salmon Wisdom River Ridge, Bowman Valley, High Basin Forests, and as we've seen, the area of the Ozarks that we've personally been in. So echo is the only zone where the wilderness behaves like a thinking predator, which is very scary.
But the key difference here is intent. And this is the heart of the segment. Where foxtrot equals removal with no warning, no stalking, no sounds, no struggle, and no remains or no evidence, echo is all about engagement. It watches, it tests, it approaches and retreats, circles, and then escalates. Foxtrot takes, echo decides.
And the environmental differences you see in the two zones, there's some similarities, some not. But the big one of a foxtrot is the boulder fields, granite ridges, the cave systems, the dense forest, the high tourism, and high accessibility. In the echo zone, this is where you have all the abandoned mining tunnels, steep ridge lines, and deep valleys, remote basins, the low human presence. And with all those old mining trails, logging trails, things like that, it's rugged. It's very rugged terrain. The foxtrot happens is where people go, and echo happens where people shouldn't go. Just like the places we've been up there in the Ozarks.
Right, and maybe even LBL might qualify as a zone echo.
Yep.
You could, yeah, absolutely.
And the behavioral differences, which I think this is important too. In foxtrot, there's no escalation, no intimidation, no pursuit, no vocalizations, and no visible presence. It's just like 1 minute you're by yourself, next minute you're not. In echo, there's escalation, intimidation, pursuit, vocalization, and a visible presence. It's almost like you have a chance to get away in echo and you don't in foxtrot.
Right.
So where foxtrot is absence, echo is presence.
And the government response on those areas really kind of defines the difference in the two. In foxtrot, you find search and rescue teams, redacted reports, trails being rerouted, drones banned, and in as Doc said, environmental hazard closures. But in echo, there's a federal presence, which we've seen with the 24-hour service van, restricted access, mapping limitations, quiet monitoring, but zero public acknowledgement. Foxtrot gets search teams. Echo gets silence.
Mm-hmm. And the only why echo is the only confirmed zone, and this is critical, it's the only confirmed zone because behavior is consistent, the sightings are consistent, the geography is consistent, the disappearance is consistent, the government response is also consistent, and the Bauman account matches modern reports. So that's over 130 plus years of identical behavior, those patterns, those consistencies. And so echo is the only zone where the pattern hasn't changed in over a century, and that's why echo is literally, because we talked about zone echo several shows back, it's the anchor of the entire zone system.
Yeah, so like we've said, foxtrot removes, echo hunts. Understanding the difference is the key to understanding the zones. It's like we talked about. There's backbones and heartbeats and all this kind of. It all works together, and we have to understand that. So now that we've defined the zones, it's time to reveal the system itself. Next, we're going to talk about.
What's that?
We're going to talk about zone classification systems.
Okay. No, good. Yeah, the zone classification systems are pretty interesting. For the last couple hours, we've talked about triangles, we've talked about hotspots, we've talked about disappearance clusters, we've even talked about government behavior. But now we're going to talk about the system that ties all of this together, the zone classification system.
And why this system exists, it's a way of categorizing these wilderness anomalies based on behavior, not species. So patterns, right? It doesn't care about what the creature looks like. It doesn't care. They don't care what people call it or what folklore says or what the public believes. It cares about behavior, risk level, environmental patterns, disappearance patterns, the government response to it, and the historical continuity. So it's not about naming creatures, it's about making sure we understand the land.
So the zones fall into 3 tiers. Tier 1 is a confirmed zone, i.e. zone echo, which we've talked about. Tier 2, the probable zone. Golf, Juliet, Charlie, Delta, Foxtrot, Kilo, Lima, Mike, November. Tier 3, theoretical zones, Bravo, India, Hotel, and Alpha. Each zone represents a different type of wilderness anomaly, and each one has its own behavioral signature.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the flow chart on the
Yep.
screen for y'all.
Zone Echo, which is confirmed, is a behavioral escalation zone, and you can see that on here. Where is it at? Right there, very top. Zone Echo red. That's the Bitterroot Mountains activity level is critical. The signature includes stalking, watching, interception, escalation, and intelligence. Echo was the only zone that has documented disappearances dating back more than 130 years. A lot of those aren't even reported. There's so many disappearances in and around that valley, yet all of the stories are consistently depict the same identical behaviors.
Mm-hmm. 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 And then if you want to talk about Zone Golf,
which is here in the Ozarks.
Which is here in the Ozarks. So that's the Ozarks Triangle, Mark Twain National Forest, Joe Bald, multi-species anomaly zone. So that's where you get that overlap from the Texas area, right? That triangle there, and the triangle here, the Ozarks Triangle. So that's where you get a lot of activity level because you have multi-species overlap. So you got Big Dogman, Bigfoot, the Howler, unknown species, other unknown cryptids, and like I just said, overlapping territory. So this Gulf is the only zone where it's almost like it's too dense. The wilderness is super crowded. So yeah.
So moving on to Zone Juliet, which is a probable zone. It's a lethal zone. The regions are the Alaskan Triangle, which we talked about, I believe, the very first, and the level is also critical. The signature for that zone is fatal disappearances, no remains, and this was the only one that had this big outlier, the aircraft vanishings. Juliet basically doesn't hunt; it erases, because that's where you find absolutely nothing, no tracks, no wreckage, no campsites, no bodies, no nothing. It's just gone. As Doc likes to say, like a fart in the wind.
Exactly.
And
Zone Charlie is another probable zone. It's a visual distortion zone. The Bridgewater Triangle, moderate to high level of activity. Shadow figures, tree line watchers, non-contact entities. Charlie doesn't touch you, but it does let you see that it's watching you.
Yeah, and then if you go into Zone Delta, it's another probable aggression zone. It's in the LBL, the Texas Dogman Corridor. Just talked about that. The activity level there is high, critical, and the signature behavior there is territorial displays, vehicle pacing, livestock predation, and direct pursuit. So Delta is the only zone where the wilderness comes at you and charges.
And that moves us into Zone Foxtrot, another probable zone. And Foxtrot, as we just talked about earlier, is the disappearance zone. The regions include Yosemite, Smokies, the Adirondacks, the Rockies, and the Bennington Triangle. Activity level is high. The signatures in that zone are sudden vanishings, no tracks, no scent trail, and no remains. So, like we said, Foxtrot is the extraction zone, so to speak.
Then another probable is Zone Kilo, the Northwest Apex Zone. Washington, Oregon, Northern California. Activity level is very high. The signature is thus the single largest Bigfoot cluster in the U.S. Infrasound, Ridge Watchers. Kilo is the apex primate zone.
And then that moves right into Zone Lima, which is a probable, and that's the upper Midwest Dogman Corridor, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Illinois. So you talk about people who, the northern Michigan, North Michigan Dogman. The activity level there is very high. So what we're looking at is upright canids, roadside encounters, and vehicle pacing. And so Lima is Delta's northern cousin.
And that brings us into Zone Mike, another probable, the Appalachian Ridgeback Zone, which is West Virginia, Kentucky, and Virginia. The activity level is high. The signature behaviors is a lot of Bigfoot. Heard reports of a thing called the sheep squatch. White things, or I'm assuming those are kind of like white walkers too. And then mimicry, which is hearing your buddy's voice in the woods or your voice in the woods, and he's standing right beside you. You're there. So Mike is where the Appalachians get weird, and I can verify that the Appalachians do get weird.
Right. And Zone November, another probable zone. This is one of the areas that Jesus Payan has researched. The Four Corners Anomaly Zone. Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico, where those 4 states meet. And that's moderate to high levels of activity. Shadow entities, tall humanoids, interference anomalies, thunderbirds, desert Bigfoot, and all manner of things that are seen on the Navajo Res, including, you guessed it, skinwalkers.
Yep.
November is ancient. It dates back since before our ancestors were on this continent.
Yeah, and then that moves us into theoretical zones. Where in Zone Bravo, we have acoustic distortion in the forms of mimicry and infrasound. In Zone India, we have interference. So there's GPS drift and radio disruption. In Zone Hotel, we have historical continuity. So you have ancient and modern sightings. As Zone Alpha is you have biological anomalies where people have been casting a lot of tracks, getting good hair samples, and the zones exist. These zones exist on the edges of the map. It's not confirmed, but it's impossible to ignore these facts.
And one thing to bear in mind about this, if you guys have been listening to us, is it is very possible for one area to be classified in more than one zone.
Yep, and I think we've proven that with Combs Ferry and all that. I mean, but the multiple overlap from the Texas Dogman Triangle and that zone to that's two separate zones, and I think you could classify one or the other on either one of them.
No, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah,
but that in itself is the key, because the zone system is the key to this. It explains the triangles, it explains the hotspots, it explains the disappearance clusters, it explains the government response. And now that we understand the zones, it's time to look at one of the most dangerous of them all, Zone Delta, the LBL, where we'll be in a couple of months.
Land between the lakes, Zone Delta. Some zones watch, some zones take, some zones confuse, but only one zone in the continental United States consistently shows aggression. The land between the lakes, Zone Delta. Defining land between the lakes is difficult. It's not all that difficult. Land between the lakes used to be known as land between the rivers. Dating back to the 1600s, the natives in the area called it cursed land. But in 1963, the Tennessee Valley Authority dammed up the 2 rivers and created Kentucky Lake and Lake Barkley, reducing land between the rivers to what we now know as land between the lakes, which is a 170,000-acre national recreation area on the Kentucky-Tennessee border. It's a narrow strip of land between Kentucky Lake and Lake Barkley. Dense hardwood forest, long narrow peninsula. When something else we've noticed is a lot of activity seems to be concentrated on peninsulas. Limited escape routes, rural roads, tons of abandoned homesteads, and more cemeteries than you could shake a stick at, and a heavy wildlife presence. Although at certain times of the year you don't see a danged one of them. It's one of the most isolated regions east of the Mississippi.
And why the LBL is not part of the Ozarks Triangle is, because people typically think about this, they lump LBL right into that Ozarks Triangle, but is geographically, ecologically, and behaviorally, LBL is its very own special little critter. So the differences that we have there and the LBL versus the Ozarks Triangle is no multi-species overlap, no howlers reported, no cave-driven ecosystems, and no karst terrain. So that because the LBL it's flat, it's dense, it's wet, it's isolated, and it's linear. No, it's not a crossroads like the Ozarks. It's something. It's not. So like the Ozark Triangle, you have all the cross traffic. This is just a flow through. This is a corridor, a pathway.
Yeah, and so let's get into the dogman behavioral profile for the LBL.
Although before you jump into that, I do want to say, while Bigfoot sightings are common there, LBL is known for the dogman.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now I was going to hint that, so thank you for doing that. So I'll just go straight into this. It's,
okay.
Like you said, it's defined by one species, even though, like DA said, there have been Bigfoot sightings in there. It's defined by the dogman species. Upright canids, 7 to 8 feet tall with long limbs, forward-facing eyes, massive chest, digitigrade legs, and very territorial behavior. Personally witnessed that. Behaviorally, they approach humans. Witnessed that. They charge vehicles. Didn't witness that, thank goodness. They pace alongside cars, attack livestock, display dominance, and don't flee. Witnessed that. The LBL is the only zone where the dominant species consistently approaches humans. We talked about that earlier.
Yep.
And, the aggression pattern. Zone Delta is defined by direct pursuit, territorial displays, vehicle impacts, fence destruction, livestock predation, roadside encounters, growls, snarls, and intimidation. In fact, LBL reintroduced both wood bison and elk, and the populations are growing, yet you're not allowed to hunt them. I believe those were put there as a distraction prey species to try to limit the number of people that were being attacked. Delta is the only zone where aggression is the primary behavior. It's not curious, it's not cautious, it's straight up territorial.
Yeah, and it's not an isolated hotspot. It's the southern anchor of a larger dogman corridor. Like we just said, this is a corridor. This is a pathway, a conduit. This is not a crossroads like the Ozarks Triangle over there. So this corridor runs from East Texas through Arkansas into Western Tennessee, up into the LBL, and even further north into Kentucky. And now I
would even say it goes up into Ohio as well.
Yeah, and maybe even further than that, because you go into you can even go up to probably, I would say, maybe up in the Alleghenies. You know what I mean? So this is the what we know of now. LBL is the northern terminus of that corridor, that Delta corridor, and that's where we've seen aggression, and all the stories we've talked about. This is where we've seen aggression really get high, where it's peaked.
Yep, and the environmental factors in that. The LBL's geography amplifies that danger. Like we said, it's peninsula, which we've talked about. It's a narrow landmass, water on both sides, limited escape routes. There's a dense forest all over the place, low visibility, long straight roads, and few residents other than the ones that are underground and underwater. It's a natural funnel, which we've talked about that on Combs Ferry, that natural funnel, which predators love. We've told several stories about how they love to funnel prey.
Right.
I mean, they funneled y'all right back to the boat ramp, did they not?
They did.
Right. They damn sure did.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, that was that was a hell of a night. So.
But in LBL, then we've also got to discuss the federal presence. This is where the zone theory just becomes unavoidable. The patterns include heavy ranger presence, restricted areas. There are lots of restricted areas in LBL. Quiet patrols, unmarked vehicles, limited public access to certain roads, seasonal closures, and no official explanation. Hellbent Holler, they've actually showed a number of old campsites and roads back through the back parts of LBL that you can only get to on foot because they've basically sealed them off. So when the government treats a recreation area like a containment zone, that's not tourism, that's management.
Yeah, and this zone delta here is nearly critical. And that's because what we just talked about, man, the high aggression, the high frequency rate, the number of times this has been reported, the consistency, the proximity to humans, the high livestock predation, and the high pursuit behavior. But one of the big things is there's been no mass disappearances, no aircraft vanishings, and there doesn't seem to be the reconnaissance or the intelligence level like we see in the zone echo. So from what we see right now, Delta is the most aggressive zone in the continental United States, but it's not the smartest. They're not. It's not a thinker; it's a doer, right? And so that title, the smartest zone, we believe belongs to Zone Echo.
So, we've talked about it, but the land between the lakes is a predator's corridor. We've laid out why we think that's a perfect spot for that. A place where wilderness doesn't hide, it charges. Aggression isn't the only way zones interact, though. Some zones overlap, which we've talked about and shown. Some zones stack. We've shown that too. Some zones amplify each other. I think we've shown that too. But let's talk about how the zones overlap.
Up to now, we've talked about zones as if they were completely separate, individual, self-contained. But the truth is, they're not. The zones overlap. They stack, they reinforce each other, and when they do, the wilderness changes. The map isn't flat. When you look at the zone map, it's tempting to see it as a flat diagram, colored regions on a page, but the zones are layers, not borders. They overlap like weather systems, migration corridors, geological strata, and predator territories, and when two zones overlap, the behavior changes.
So talking about the two zones, let's look at let's see if when Gulf and Delta overlap. That's when we have the Ozarks Triangle and the Dogman corridor coming up from Texas. So there's the aggression amplifier. So in the Ozarks zone Gulf, the multi-species zone touches that northern edge of zone Delta, which is the aggression zone. And so what happens there is we get Dogman aggression that increases, Bigfoot behavior that becomes far more territorial because there's more stuff there. Howler reports are spiking, shadow entities appear more frequently, and even vocalizations intensify in that area. And it's almost like these two ecosystems are colliding, and the collision point's volatile. Something's going to spill over, something's going to happen. So it's pretty interesting, man.
Yeah, and speaking on that, let's talk about Foxtrot and Bravo. The disappearance versus the acoustics, the mimicry corridor, if you will. In the Appalachian zone Foxtrot, the disappearance zone overlaps with zone Bravo, the acoustic distortion zone. What happens when you get this happen? Mimicry increases. And how many times have you heard stories about, don't whistle in the woods in the Appalachians?
Yep.
This is very, very, that just hammers that point home right there. Voices call from the tree line. We've heard plenty of stories from that. Children's voices heard where no children are.
Nope.
Dogs refusing to track. How many times have we talked about that? People vanishing after following a sound. How many times have we heard you hear your buddy calling you in the woods or a woman crying or something like that late at night?
Right.
Doc, would you look at the time?
Yeah. Nope.
So Bravo doesn't take people, but Foxtrot does. But when they overlap, the sound becomes the lure.
Then we got Juliet and India, lethal plus interference zones, the electronic dead zones. In Alaska, Zone Juliet, which is the lethal zone, it overlaps with Zone India, the interference zone. What happens? GPS fails, radios cut out, aircraft vanish, thermal imaging glitches, drones lose signal, and search and rescue teams lose communication. It's not just the land becomes dangerous, it's the air you're breathing.
And then just like with the Zone Mike and Zone Foxtrot, the Appalachian Ridgeback area and the disappearance zones, the stack here is the Appalachians in there, the Zone Mike, the Ridgeback zone sits directly on top of multiple Foxtrot clusters. So what we see here happening is the sightings of Bigfoot spike, white thing encounters increase, mimicry becomes far more common, disappearances rise, and then shadow entities appear on the ridge lines. And it's really one of the most complex stacks in the entire system because there's a lot going on there, man. There's a lot going on from different sides.
Yep, and then you get November plus hotel, the Four Corners plus historical continuity, the ancient zone. In the Four Corners region, Zone November overlaps with Zone Hotel, the historical continuity zone. And what happens when you get that is modern sightings match ancient stories. We've talked about that. Shadow entities appearing in canyon systems, tall humanoids seen in the mesas, interference anomalies increase, sightings cluster around sacred sites. It's one of the few places where the past and the present describe the exact same thing. And we've talked about that consistency over, multiple decades of it being the exact same as they reported 130 plus years ago than as sightings are today.
And this is kind of critical here. This is why Echo, which is in the Bitterroots, doesn't really overlap with anything else. Zone Echo is the behavioral escalation zone. It doesn't overlap with any other zone. It just covers its area. Echo requires complete isolation. Echo requires deep wilderness. Echo requires a very low human presence, and it also requires a very specific geography. Its behavior is unique. Echo stands alone, and really that's what makes it so dangerous.
Yeah, it does. And then the thesis of this segment is talking about what overlap, because DA was just talking about overlap. Robbie was talking about overlap. We've all talked about it. What does it really mean? So when zones overlap, you have behavioral changes, and when those behaviors change, the risk increases. And what do we say we base our scientific theory on? Pattern, something observable and repeatable, right, Robbie? Is what you were just talking about. Yep. And so this pattern intensifies here, and the overlap creates hybrid behavior, amplified activity. The sightings are increased, disappearances, the aggression is definitely increased, and so is the interference. So, and the more zones that overlap, the more that happens, the more alive the wilderness starts to feel.
Yep. So, like DA said earlier, zones aren't borders; they're layers. Yeah. They're not individually fenced off areas. These things can roam in and out of any of these zones. They're not, they're not contained in these areas. The wilderness, where the layers are stacked up like that, the wilderness becomes something else. But to understand why zones exist at all, we have to go back to the beginning. Next, Roosevelt and the Bauman, and the origin of Zone Echo.
Roosevelt, Bauman, and the origins of Zone Echo we've covered before. We did a whole show on it. Every zone has a beginning, a first report, a first pattern, a first moment where the wilderness revealed what it actually was. For Zone Echo, that moment was in 1889. The Bauman incident was in 1889. A young Teddy Roosevelt published an account he'd been told by a frontiersman named Bauman. And we've gone over this. Bauman was Teddy Roosevelt's nickname in college, but that's neither here nor there. It's one of the oldest, most detailed wilderness encounter stories in American history. Two trappers in a remote valley in the Bitterroot Mountains. Something stalks their camp, something on two legs, something intelligent, and it tested them. It wasn't a monster story. It was a behavioral report.
Yeah, and the behavioral signature of this incident is what is, I think, the key thing, because the Bauman incident contains every single behavior that defines Zone Echo today. So number one is stalking. So something followed them, stayed just out of sight, and it moved only when they moved. It was pacing them. Number two is the watching, the eyes in a tree line, the presence felt, not seen. I can feel it, but I can't see it. And number three is where we had interception. That's where trails were cut off, paths were blocked, and movement was anticipated. And then moving into four was the escalation. First night it watched, second night approached, third night attacked. And y'all have heard other stories we've talked about with this same type of approach in that same zone. The last thing was the intelligence, how it avoided traps, how it circled camp, and how it waited until people separated. And so every behavior we see in Zone Echo today was present in 1889, so over 130 plus years ago.
Before we move on to the next one, we're going to have to take a quick break. Just the time was creeping up on us. It's a good thing Miss Lene reminded me. Yeah. We're going to take a quick pause for a commercial break. We will be right back, and we will pick this up as soon as we get back. So, folks, stretch your legs, walk the dog, go to the bathroom, top off your coffee, grab a drink, smoke them if you got them. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine Who may be doing the haunting and why? How to research a haunted house can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unxmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unxmedia.com or amazon.com. In a world where monsters still walk the earth, one author dares to face them. From the brutal cryptid horror of the Apex Predator series to the Ozark legends that stalk the night in Lakeview Man, from the elite warriors of codename Wild Hunt to the relentless investigations of the Nightmare Hunter and the frontier terror of Dark Frontiers. When the dead rise, the Ragnarok Rising saga unleashes pure zombie apocalypse fury. And across the stars, war rages in the Lost Legion and Man's Marauders. And in the realm of myth and steel, the world of Vanguard calls to those born for legend. Cryptids, zombies, sci-fi warfare, epic fantasy. This is the universe of DARoberts.
Hey everybody, this is Kerry Pocket Dot Davis from Dark Angel Medical, and you are listening to DA Ex Machina with DARoberts. You may recognize me or some of my products from Dark Angel Medical in some of the Apex Predator, Lakeview Man, and Wild Hunt books, and you can get those products at www.darkangelmedical.com, along with training classes on how to use those products and save a life. Shoot us an email at info@darkangelmedical.com and be the difference.
And folks, we are back. Thank you guys for sticking with us. And like I said, we still have a lot of material to cover, so we're going to jump right back into this. Robbie, you want to jump into that next one?
Yep. The kill. This is still from the Bauman incident. The Bauman account ends with one trapper dead. His neck was broken. Body had been dragged. There were no tracks leading away. No sign of a struggle. And no remains of the attacker. Wasn't a bear. Wasn't a cat. It wasn't anything that we know of.
But the geography is important as well. This is where the pattern becomes undeniable. The Bauman incident took place in the Bitterroot Mountains near where the Salmon and Wisdom Ridges meet, in the same valleys where modern echo sightings occur, the same region where disappearance clusters, and the same terrain that echo requires. The Bauman incident didn't just happen in a random valley. It happened in the heart of Zone Echo.
And there's a 130-year continuity line there. And this is the spine of what we're talking about of our segment. From 1889, during the Bauman incident, to today, the Bitterroot Mountains have produced identical stalking behavior, identical pacing behavior, identical ridge shadowing, identical tree breaks and rock throws, and identical disappearances and trail termination and camp harassment, all of it. Right? So Zone Echo is the only zone that we have in all the zones with well over a century of consistent behavior. And that's what we look at, is patterns and consistency. And so the Bauman incident is that first documented case, and everything else we've talked about since then has been documented, follows the same exact pattern as what occurred in the Bauman case.
And leading into that, let's look at the modern echo pattern. Modern reports from the Bitterroots include hunters being shadowed for miles, camps being circled at night, heavy bipedal footsteps, ridge watchers, tree breaks, rock throws, sudden silence in the forest, trails that end abruptly, people vanishing without a trace. Doc just said it. It's the same pattern that Bauman described, down to the smallest detail, from a 130-year time frame.
And then we look at the government response. And this is where the zone theory becomes unavoidable, folks. In the Echo region, drone flights are completely restricted. Trails have been completely rerouted around the area. Certain valleys are still closed. Mapping is incomplete. Search and rescue reports are sealed. And the federal presence there is quiet but consistent. Echo is the only zone where the government behaves like it's dealing with an intelligent predator.
And why Echo is the only confirmed zone is because of the consistency, the behavior, the geography, the disappearances. They're all consistent. The government response, historical record matches the modern record, still consistent. And then the Bauman account, like I just said, aligns perfectly with everything that's happening today's in their reports. So it's the anchor of the zone system. It's the first one that was identified as a zone. It's the oldest zone. And again, we said it before, we'll say it again. It's the most intelligent zone. It's a thinking zone.
The Bauman incident wasn't just a campfire story. It was a warning that the wilderness can think, a warning that the wilderness can be blunt, or can hunt, excuse me, and that we trace the zones from their origin to the present. It's time to connect the entire map. Next, the unified map.
And the unified map is important for a lot of reasons. But for the last almost 3 hours now, we've walked through the triangles, the hotspots, the disappearance clusters, the zones. We've explained them in detail. We've even talked about the government response, the history behind it all, and the behavior. Now it's time to put it all together. So when you overlay the 4 major wilderness maps of the United States, something emerges. The triangle map, Alaskan Triangle, Ozarks Triangle, Bridgewater Triangle, Bennington Triangle, and the Texas Dogman Triangle. And I'm sure there may be others out there we're not aware of. The hotspot maps also, you lay that down. Bigfoot clusters, Dogman corridors, howler regions, shadow entity spots. Then you add the missing 411 map, Yosemite, the Smokies, Adirondacks, Rockies, Bitterroots, and the Green Mountains. And then the zone map, when we start talking about everything from Echo on down. And when you stack those maps, the same regions light up. And let's just pop a few of these. This map right here is a map of the missing 411 clusters, and the map above it, Bigfoot sightings. So you guys sensing a pattern here?
Was kind of familiar, huh?
Yeah. And this is the missing 411 and known cave systems. Okay, now remember that pattern because I don't have an overlay for this one. This, however, is known Dogman sightings.
Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, it gets better. Bigfoot sightings. And hotspots in the Ozarks.
And there we were, right up in there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So all those regions, and that's so funny. That's the reason, just letting you know, everybody, this is for entertainment purposes only, okay?
Exactly.
So, just letting you know. And so there's a national pattern here. So the U.S. has a network of wilderness anomalies. They're not they're not any of them isolated. They're not random. They're accidental. They form corridors, pathways. So right, and then they have clusters in between those corridors. There's also overlaps and stacks, hot zones, dead zones, predator zones, disappearance zones. It's a system. It's a system that covers the entire nation, and every area has their own characteristics. So it's definitely a national system.
And the 3 primary corridors across the U.S., 3 major anomaly corridors emerge. You got the Western corridor, which consists of Alaska, the Juliet zone, Rockies, which are Foxtrot, the Bitterroots, Echo, and the Cascades, Kilo. Then you got the Central corridor, the Ozarks, the Zone Golf, LBL, Delta, and the Texas Dogman corridor, which is also Delta. Then you got the Eastern corridor, the Appalachians, Mike, Bravo, and Foxtrot, Smokies, Foxtrot, the Adirondacks, also Foxtrot, and the Bridgewaters, which are Charlie. 3 corridors that are the backbone of the zone system.
And the 3 types of zone regions will fall into 3 geographic categories. Apex zones, which are Echo, Kilo, and Juliet. The most dangerous are these are the most dangerous and the most active. The corridor zones, Delta, Lima, Mike, and Golf. These are the movement pathways. Cluster zones, Foxtrot, Charlie, Bravo, India, Hotel, Alpha, and November. These are all the behavioral clusters, and every one of them fits into the national pattern.
Yeah, and we're the government behavior, when you overlay that on the map, on top of the zone map, that's where the map becomes undeniable. And because the pattern I mean, the pattern's impossible to ignore, man. The government actions cluster around these areas here: Echo, Juliet, Foxtrot, Delta, and Golf. And the patterns that we're looking at is that the restrictions that we were talking about all throughout the show: the drone bans, the trail rerouting, the restricted access, the redacted SAR reports, mapping limitations, and a quiet but and maybe unknown in some instances federal present there. So they're not reacting to that folklore. They're reacting to those zones. And what do we say some of that stuff is? That's containment right there. Whenever when you're in that area there. So that's all containment areas.
And that leads us into the behavioral layer. Each zone has a distinct behavioral signature. Echo, as we've talked about, is intelligence. Juliet, lethal. Delta, aggression. Golf, multiple species. Foxtrot is a disappearance zone. Charlie is a watching zone. Bravo, mimicry. India, interference. Hotel, historical continuity. Alpha, biological anomalies. Kilo, apex primate. Lima, northern canid. Mike, Appalachian hybrid. November, desert shadow entities. When you map behavior, the zones align perfectly with the geography.
And that leads us to the unified theory. This is the thesis of this entire episode, folks. The triangles are the public pattern. The hotspots are the cryptid pattern, the ones that the researchers like ourselves and so many others have been looking at, identifying these cryptid patterns by reading reports, talking to people, going out in the woods. Then there's the missing 411 clusters. That's the disappearance pattern. And the zones, that's the government pattern. And when you combine all four, you get the unified map. A map that shows where the wilderness is dangerous, where the wilderness is intelligent, where it's crowded, where it's hungry, where the wilderness is ancient, where it's watching, where it takes people, and where the wilderness hunts. And where the wilderness is something else entirely.
Yeah, and that unified map is not a theory. It's there in front of us. It's a pattern, and it's a pattern that stretches from Alaska down to Florida, from Maine to California, from the Rockies to the Appalachians. And now that we've connected that map and all the synchronicity there, there's only one question left, and that's, what does it mean?
Like DA said, for over 2 hours now, we've talked through the strangest places in America. The triangles, the hotspots, the disappearance borders, the zones. Now the map's complete. We have only that one last question that matters. What does it mean? The wilderness is not empty, to be quite frank about it. The first thing is the unified map. It tells us simply that the wilderness is not empty. It contains predators that we don't understand, behaviors that we don't understand, patterns older than this country, regions where people vanish, regions where something watches, regions where something hunts. And those regions aren't random, they're structured.
And the wilderness is not uniform. The second thing the map tells us is that the wilderness is not one thing, it's many different things. Of course, we're going over the zones again: intelligence and Echo, lethality and Juliet, aggression and Delta, disappearances in Foxtrot, multi-species ecosystem in Golf, which is here in the Ozarks, visual anomalies in Charlie, acoustic anomalies in Bravo, interference in India, ancient continuity in Hotel, biological anomalies Alpha, apex primates in Kilo, northern canids in Lima, Appalachian hybrids in Mike, and desert shadows in November. It's not one mystery, it's a network of them.
Absolutely, and I would have this one. The government knows more than it says, because here's the thing, man. The third thing that the map tells us, there's far more going on than is being put to light right now, because the behavior. Okay, where does that quiet federal presence we talked about, right? Where does that behavior cluster around? Echo, Juliet, Foxtrot, Delta, and Golf. Where the patterns are: the drone bans, the trail rerouting, the redacted SAR info, restricted access, and that presence. So they don't explain it. They don't explain the zones, but they act like the zones are real, because there's restrictions and a federal presence and everything else. Where why else would they be there if there was not something there? Right?
And here's the big red flag to that is these zones aren't new. This isn't something that just happened yesterday. That's what the fourth thing that the map tells us is they aren't modern, they're ancient.
Yeah.
And that's because indigenous stories match the sightings that we've talked about. Frontier journals match the modern behavior. The Bauman incident matches the sightings and echo to this day.
Mm-hmm.
The Ozarks have 300 plus years of reports, and the Four Corners region has millennia of continuity. The zones didn't just appear. We just learned how to see them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, they're definitely not new. But the wilderness is speaking to us. This is the core of this. The zones aren't just places, they're signals, they're patterns, they're warnings. And if we pay attention to these patterns, we can predict where these zones are. They tell us where the land is dangerous, where the land is intelligent, where the land is ancient and hungry, where the land is watching us, where it takes people, and where it hunts, and where the land remembers.
And so what comes next? This map, this unified map that we're talking about, it's not the end of the investigation. Actually, on the contrary, it's the beginning, because we know now where to look, what to look for, how the zones behave, how they overlap, how they escalate, how they interact, and how they hide. And like Robbie was saying, this has been going on for centuries. It's just now we know how to see everything. We have enough data from all over because we have that capability now that we see these patterns. And so now we know how to survive them, hopefully.
So what we've talked about and how we've laid this out, we know that the wilderness is older than us. It's stranger than us. It's more aware than we want to believe it is. For generations, we've told stories about things that live in the dark, but tonight we didn't tell stories. We connected the map. The triangles, the hotspots, the disappearance clusters, the zones, they're not separate mysteries, as DA has pointed out several times throughout the night. Mm-hmm. They're one system, one pattern, and one truth. The map is speaking, and now we finally know how to read it.
Mm-hmm.
And folks, that's the map. That's the pattern. That's the system the wilderness has been drawing for more than a century. And whether you're listening from a crowded city or a cabin on the edge of nowhere, remember this. The land is older than us, stranger than us, and far more organized than we ever imagined. Before we close tonight, we want to repeat what we said at the beginning. We're all in good health. We're all accounted for. We're all safe. And none of us have any plans to disappear anytime soon. So once again, the show is for entertainment purposes only. We explore stories, patterns, and documented cases, but we're not claiming certainty, and we're not encouraging anyone to go looking for trouble. So if you've enjoyed tonight's deep dive into the zones, the triangles, and the hidden patterns of the American wilderness, do us a favor. Like the show, share it with someone who loves the strange, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. You've been listening to the Nightmare Hunters, and we'll see you guys out there on the trail. And we had 106 pages of notes to cover for tonight's show, and I apologize, folks. We actually made it through. I thought it was going to be a two-parter. Now we've finally gotten through everything we needed to cover. Now we'll be happy to answer questions, folks. I couldn't even keep track of them because I was trying to keep us on task so we could get to 106 pages of notes.
That was a lot.
That was a lot.
Yes, 106.
Yes, sir. 106 pages of notes.
Thank you, Madison.
Thank you, Madison.
Best half of Holly has a question about ley lines.
I didn't even think to overlap ley lines on that, but the ley lines are global. I mean, we know a lot of them run through some of these areas.
We've already looked at it in LBL, and it's a convergence. There's at least 3, if not more, ley lines that run through LBL. We know that.
There's a couple of intersections in the southern Ozarks too.
But we broached that theory when me and Johnny lost connectivity as the show started when we were down there that last time?
Roxanne, the chart I actually constructed from multiple sources. So the chart was not an official government chart. I put that together from all the information I've gathered. Thank you, Camo Dad. Josh Dalton says 106. Yeah, we could have talked for 6 hours. I had to streamline the notes before I sent them to the guys because it was like when I first started putting all this together for the show tonight, it was like 260 pages of notes, and I went through and started cutting stuff out. Victor says, ever seen petroglyphs? She who watches the state park. I have not seen those particular ones, but I've seen a lot of petroglyphs out in New Mexico and Arizona. Yes, Jeff, we stayed for the most part on the rails. Clayton Plot says, "Great show. This is evidence of something strange happening. No matter what you believe, you can choose to believe in the what we laid out tonight, the zone system. You can choose to believe in it or not. That is entirely up to you. One thing we will never do is try to tell you what to think. We're just going to present the information we've gathered and present it in an orderly fashion to let you form your own conclusions. So whether you choose to believe or not is entirely up to you. Your opinions are just as valid as ours, but." That is an awful lot of information that fits that theory.
Oh, absolutely. And if y'all have been following the format of the show over the last couple of months, 3 months or so, when we're talking about all these encounters in different areas, if you have paid attention to that stuff, you'll notice there were so many similarities in what we were talking tonight and how that all related to itself, how it all related together.
Curtis, that's a great question. He says, any chance that some of the cave systems are territory for some cryptids, causing some to travel overland for certain stretches? I think at certain times of the year, especially during rainier parts of the year, like in the spring, that a lot of those cave systems are flooded. So that's probably why we see a lot more activity in the spring and possibly even in the fall. But I think there are times when they have to be above ground, but I also think there's a lot of times when they are below ground as well. Just a guy says, do you boys plan on investigating some of the more dangerous zones? It was either Echo or Foxtrot. I would love to get up into the Bitterroots. If that's something we can do at some point, yes. We're going to be in LBL shortly, and we're going to be getting back into some of the areas of the Ozarks. I'm going to try to get down to Drury Mincy this coming weekend. Thank you, Sherry. Miss Lene sent me a ley line map. All right, I will pull that. Let me bring that up and I'll share it with everybody. Okay, give me just a second. Here's the ley line map, and you guys can see that those ley lines hit a lot of places in the U.S., and that's where the convergences are where some of the more what they refer to as the thinning of the veil occur. But you can see right here, that is this section. If you can see my cursor moving, there's a convergence of 1, 2, 3, at least 3 ley lines, possibly 4, right near the LBL area. And of course, we've got a couple moving through the Ozarks with a big cluster over here in Illinois, and then a major cluster down here near the Arizona-New Mexico border, and another one up in Canada. But yeah, the ley lines, I would say that they definitely should be taken into consideration when we're looking at all of this stuff. Minxie says, DA, you've pretty much correlated a book on the zones. Yeah, and if you guys see us speaking at conventions in the near future, we're probably going to be discussing the zone theory in person at a lot of these events because it's too compelling to ignore. Don, you're absolutely right. We've been saying for a long time those maps overlap.
Yeah, but like we said, about 3 years now, we've been kind of working on this theory.
Jessica says, big anticipation on that big DARoberts expedition. I want to hear about them cougar men. I'm going to get down there for at least a recon, hopefully this weekend. Trying to make sure Noah's going to be off work, and I'm going to get a hold of a couple people to go down with me. We're definitely going armed, but it probably won't be a lengthy foray. It's probably going to be just exploring the area and taking some pictures. And then once we analyze all of that and everything we learn while we're down there, then we'll probably go back down for a much longer period of time. Thank you, Curtis. Appreciate it, man. Clayton says, DA, have you looked into the Michael Dana Green, North Carolina Bigfoot footage? I have not yet. I was working on this show up until, about an hour before we went live. Paramedics says, need to check out the area. Northeast Oklahoma is very little population out there. Northeast Oklahoma is right there near Miami, Oklahoma, where a lot of sightings on the res come.
I taught there. I might be going back teaching again.
Nice. Roxanne says, DA, it'll be cold this weekend and possible rain. Be careful. We absolutely will. Boys, can you cover for a minute? I need to hit the little boys' room. Be right back.
See. All right. Yes. I don't know if they hit the casinos or not, man. They might. I don't know. But there are some casinos and stuff there. Oh, and Curtis is right there in Muskogee. Oh, Miss Lene says hello.
Little doggy doc.
Little doggy doc. Yeah. But Curtis, how far are you away from the Ouachita Mountain Range? Just curious about that because I know there's lots of sightings up in that area. From what that's where the first wild hunt was set, wasn't it, Robbie? In the Ouachita Mountains.
Yeah, around Broken Bow Lake.
Yeah.
Not far from where the Charge of the Light Horsemen, the Tubbies, and French. What was his name? Was it LaFontaine or?
Don't make me lie.
Anyway,
yeah,
the Tubbies. You know, with the smallest one of them being 6'8".
Yeah, that's when they were throwing trees at the helicopters. Minxie, awesome. Yeah, you'll see my buddy Ross. He'll be teaching that class out there in California. So that would be awesome. If you do, that'd be great.
LaFleur. Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. I knew it was a French name.
LaFleur. Casino footage was north of Stillwater. There's a Brown Springs within the light glare of the casino. Wow. That's pretty cool, man. Robbie, are you guys going to be collaborating with Woodwalkers Live again?
You mean when we go to the LBL?
We'll be there at the LBL.
We'll be there with them, but as far as doing a live from there, we kind of found out that don't really work. Even if you got full battery and full signal, apparently that place don't like stuff like that.
Well, we're gonna try.
Yeah, we're gonna try, but that's all we can do is try.
We can't guarantee it.
No. But we know what the problems from last time were, so we're going to try to correct for those problems. I think, DA, aren't you going to bring that solar generator? Mm-hmm. And I think I'm going to bring the propane generator. So we're going to try to combat those problems that we had last time. And we can even plug in the Starlink Mini I got to the 12 volt on the vehicle and just crank that sucker up. Yeah, well, that's what we had to do. We had to run a drop cord from Taylor's vehicle and keep it running the whole time, just so we can get back on the show.
Camo Dad already on top of it. Since I was in the beta program out here in this area years ago, Starlink sent me a Mini for free. So
nice,
free. It's $5 a month. So
Yeah, I want to get one of those. And soon they'll be having Starlink available for your phones.
yeah, I mean, I got rid of all my hotspots because if my hotspot ain't working, well, I ain't got Wi-Fi. But I ain't got to have Wi-Fi to have the Starlink working.
That's right.
It's beautiful.
Paramedic says Hellbent Hauler said they put up several cell phone towers and had great coverage now.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Clayton Upton, Doc, what is the best kit to keep in a car that you sell? Well, there's the visor kits, there's the headrest kits, there's the hard case. So those are all good options. So the headrest kit, almost out of those. We're waiting on our resupply. They were supposed to have been in 2 weeks ago. But headrest kits, visor kits, and the hard cases. If you want like a high vis red orange case, you can have all your stuff in. There you go.
Fellas, I'm wore out. We covered a lot of territory.
That was a lot of information.
And my hat's off to you boys for staying focused on it.
Thank you.
I really did not think we were going to cover 106 pages tonight. I was thinking going in, we're going to do a part 2 on Saturday.
I have a headache now. My brain hurts. I get the brain pain.
Oh, I'm right there with you. Whew. But
Yeah,
folks, I'm really glad you guys could be here with us tonight. Tonight's show was kind of a culmination of all the theories we've been putting together over the last several years. And I think it explains it, the triangles, the hotspots, the missing 411. I think it explains it much better than anything we've ever come up with before. Thank you, Miss Lene.
Yeah,
Roxanne says yes, a part 2. Well, we might do a part 2 at some point. We will revisit the zones, but we'll probably give it a week or so because, like I said, this was a very high intensity show tonight.
Mm-hmm.
We're really dialing it in, and we will probably go back to being a little more relaxed on Saturday. But we will definitely revisit this zone theory, especially as more information comes to light.
Yeah, like I said, man, I like the way the map really put everything together, that unified map. That really brings in the stories that we've talked about over the last 3 months too.
Yep.
It really solidified everything.
And I think the theory speaks for itself. It really does bring a lot of those theories together.
Yeah, it does.
In a believable way.
Yeah.
D-Cat says part 2 could be the stuff you cut out. Well, the thing about it is the stuff I cut out were just extra examples in every one of those. So it would basically just be a recap of tonight, but just adding a lot of detail in. So I've got a lot more stuff to compile. But yeah, we will definitely do another zone show.
Yeah, I'm with you, Curtis. The map did it for me.
Yeah, once you started looking at how things overlap, you really can't unsee it.
Just a guy who yaps, the closer we come to the truth, the shorter the distance between DA's house and the bush outside gets. That's true. If I see any new bushes, I know there's definitely something afoot because
we just see a finger push this to the side and peek through.
Yeah, I live on the freaking prairie, man. So,
thank you, Miss Lene.
Thank you, Miss Lene. Don't look at me in that tone of voice.
Well, since we actually did get through this ahead of schedule, and we're kind of winding down. I know Robbie's got to be up early in the morning. We'll go ahead and start winding things down. I said earlier we weren't going to cover the affiliates. The links have been popping up all night. Make sure you're checking out Doc's new book. It's #1 in Western horror. Great book. Robbie's books are blasting through the charts. He's got a lot of books that have made it very high into the charts. Different categories are different though. No two categories are alike, and Robbie's gotten right up there, especially with Kodiak, didn't you? You actually reached number one. It just didn't credit you.
Yeah, I don't count that.
Hey, it made it. It just didn't credit you, which is, I think, stupid. But hey, it's Amazon being Amazon. But you'll check out Robbie's books, check out Doc's book, check out Luca's books, and while you're at it, maybe check out mine. You can find all of our books on Amazon.com in Kindle, print, and audio format. We're still working on the audio format for Doc's. Amazon is being Amazon once more. Yep. We will hopefully eventually get that out, but right for the moment, it's kind of on hold until we get some things sorted out with Amazon. But check out all of our awesome affiliates, the good folks at Sigwo, the awesome folks over at Dark Angel Medical, and the cool folks over at Scallywag Tactical. Check them all out. The discount codes have been popping up in chat all night. Let them know you like them. Let them know we sent you. And we're proud to support our veteran-owned and first responder-owned businesses. But as we wander down, there's one thing I always want to do, and that's to talk about the 22 a Day Foundation. We lose 22 veterans a day to suicide, and that, folks, that's just 22 too many. Check on your friends and family who are first responders or veterans who have worn a uniform in any capacity, because every one of them have had to deal with things that most people will never understand. They're fighting demons. They shouldn't have to fight those demons alone. So reach out and let them know you're thinking about them. Let them know you care. Invite them out over for a barbecue. Buy them a beer. Give them the occasional 2 a.m. Hey, effer, are you awake? As these boys have gotten from me on more than one occasion. But let them know you're thinking about them. Let them know they're important to you and that they're not facing this alone. Because at least 22 times a day, someone's losing that battle. And let's get that number down to 0. So, folks, as we wind her down, and like I said, we are very proud of this tradition. We've been doing a toast for a while now, and it's something I want to keep on doing. And I'm going to bring the toast up. And boys, which one of you fellas would like to take the toast tonight?
Well, I think Doc did it last time.
So I was going to say, don't everybody volunteer at once. Robbie? How about you, brother?
Everybody raise a glass. Don't matter what you're drinking. This is from the old Irish song, The Parting Glass. It goes, "But since it fell into my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and softly call. Good night and joy be to you all. Good night, Slanja. We'll see you Saturday. Thanks for being here."
Slanja va. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Plains, the winds are howling, saloon doors swinging, shadows growling. 3 lawmen stand tough as rawhide. Yeah, Doc and DA, nothing can abide. Whiskey shots and poker faces, staring down the darkest spaces in this town where legends roam. These boys bring justice, sending evil home. Cryptid lawmen, wild and free, hunting monsters for all to see. With silver bullets and grit of steel, they fight the darkness, make the demons squeal. From dusty canyons to moonlit plains, justice rides with wind and rains. Cryptid lawmen, a fearsome sight, standing tall against the endless night. Jed's a howler, claws of steel. Doc's a biter, makes the devil real. But DA's a shifty one, a shape-shifting soul. Can turn to anything, takes any form, takes control. Tonight the chupacabras come to town, sucking the life from all around. But these lawmen, they ain't afraid. They'll face the darkness unafraid. Cryptid lawmen, wild and free, hunting monsters for all to see. With silver bullets and grit of steel, they fight the darkness, make the demons squeal. From dusty canyons to moonlit plains, justice rides with wind and range. Cryptid lawmen, against the endless night. Bat wings flap, the air grows cold, a chill and trap. But these lawmen, they're ready to fight underneath the pale moonlight. Jet and Doc transform with a howl. DA shifts, becomes a night owl. Together they stand, a force so strong against the evil right in the road. Cryptid lawmen, wild and free, hunting monsters for all to see. With silver bullets and grit of steel, they fight the darkness, make the demons squeal. From dusty canyons to moonlit plains, justice rides with wind and rains. Cryptid lawmen, a fearsome sight, standing tall against the